All right, so about last night. As most of you know, I was at the Bulls game last night, as I typically am when they come to the Bay Area and face off against the Warriors, as it's really one of my few opportunities to see the Bulls play. Myself living and working in the Bay Area for the past 13 years, and while the game itself was absolute garbage, which I'll talk about, the experience of going to this game and for the first time in my life, sitting courtside, something I've always wanted to do but could never quite justify. A bucket list item was something I will never forget, which, quick aside, as I had a lot of people asking me about this on Twitter regarding the seats, I highly recommend, whenever you're buying tickets to a game, always buy them hours, if not minutes before tip-off. You have season ticket holders marking down their tickets to insane levels because they would rather sell it off for super cheap than to just lose the tickets for nothing. But then also, for those that know me personally, I don't really spend money on much. Like, I don't do fancy cars, fancy clothing, I don't do expensive restaurants. I don't have like a vice of any kind that I allocate a lot of money to. I get to see the Bulls once a year, and it's my one splurge item where I go all out. Now, maybe that in and of itself is a mistake because this team continues to disappoint me and loses every time I go see them play, so maybe I need to rethink that type of annual purchase. But anyway, just know that this isn't a flex of any kind. I always wanted to sit courtside at a basketball game. I saw an opportunity to do so about an hour before tip-off, and I jumped on it. Now, I do promise to get to the actual game itself, which, let's be real, there's not really much to talk about from the game in general, but I did want to talk about some of the interactions and things I witnessed sitting right alongside the Bulls bench. First and foremost, security tells you that you can't talk to the players during the game. Don't interact with them unless they interact with you, which was unfortunate because I really wanted to just strike up a conversation with some of these guys since they were sitting right next to me. That said, I did sneak a word into Matas Buzelis when he was sitting next to me because I could not help but see his frustration and maybe the lack of confidence when he kept getting taken out of the lineup for making simple rookie mistakes. Mistakes that a lot of vets have been making as well, by the way. And so I told him, look, man, keep your head up. You're going to get your shot. He didn't say anything, but he smiled and he nodded. Because look, man, the most frustrating thing about last night's game, well, there were a lot of frustrating things, but it was seeing Matas Buzelis having such a short leash where he had one bad defensive play where he gets hit with an M1 foul on Andrew Wiggins and gets taken out of the game after being in for just 2 minutes. 2 minutes in the first half. Like, how is that at all good for a young player's confidence? How is it at all good for a player's development in a year that is supposed to be a quote-unquote youth movement where you're prioritizing the development of your younger players? And yet you're consistently taking minutes away from your lottery pick from this past draft, a player who, yes, is raw, but has shown a lot of potential, a lot of promise, and also fits a pretty big need right now. Like, the biggest thing I saw last night, without just looking at the box score, was the sheer number of offensive rebounds the Warriors were getting and all of those second chance points. And this is for a pretty small Warriors team who has never really had a true center. The guys were getting outworked on the boards, and yet you're leaving one of your most athletic bigs on the bench for the majority of the game until it's garbage time. I just don't get it. I don't know what the hell Billy Donovan is doing. I get it, the game was quote-unquote competitive initially, and I know that he's still trying to win, which is fine. I don't expect a coach or the players to try and tank. That's just not in their nature. They're competitive players, and they should be. But the least you can do as a coach for this season is maybe give your rookie more of a chance to make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and get better as a player instead of just giving them the hook 2 minutes after he goes into the game because he caused an and one. Now, I mentioned I wasn't allowed to talk to the players while sitting next to them unless they talked to me. That was the rule. And while I thought, hey, they see a Bulls fan at a road game, they would maybe say something. No, most of them didn't. The only two players that acknowledged and talked to me were Ayo and Josh Giddey. So both of those guys went up a few notches in my book for briefly just talking to a fan. Shout out to them. I will say, you know, as much as we sometimes idolize these guys with how much we talk about them, sitting right there and hearing their interactions with each other, I mean, it really puts it into perspective just how normal these dudes are. Like, they were poking fun at each other here and there, but at the same time being encouraging of each other. Like, I can't tell you how many times these guys were trying to prop up Patrick Williams, encouraging him to keep shooting it, even though he had a horrible game and has been really, quite frankly, terrible this season. Kobe, even though he didn't play, he was one of the most vocal guys on the bench, also pretty hilarious, cracking jokes with players throughout the game. The other thing I'll say is Zach LaVine was very much engaged and in really good spirits with the way he was talking out there, which we've already kind of known for this season, right? We've praised Zach for his professionalism and buying into what the Bulls are doing, despite the fact that it's probably not something he's necessarily wanting at this stage in his career. Also, shout out to him last night for hitting 10,000 career points with the Bulls, only the 6th player in franchise history to do that, which, by the way, if the Bulls don't trade him before the deadline, he'll finish out the season sitting 4th on the Bulls' all-time scoring list, only behind Bob Love, Scottie Pippen, and Michael Jordan. But anyway, I was impressed with how Zach carried himself and how he was lifting up guys despite being in a blowout loss. It has been reported more recently from Jake Fisher that apparently Zach LaVine actually wants to stay with Chicago through the deadline. We'll see if that ends up playing out. Patrick Williams, Nikola Vucevic, yeah, I barely heard them speak while on the bench. I guess that probably shouldn't really be too much of a surprise as they're both pretty stoic players. But anyway, it was an incredible experience to kind of be right there with the guys in the huddle, if you will, and seeing the interactions between the players. Now, as far as the game, I mean, solid first half. Almost seemed like the Bulls couldn't miss, especially from 3, while the Warriors went a little cold to start the game, where it looked like the Bulls might actually blow these guys out. And then the second half came, and the Bulls, for the life of them, could not hit a single shot. My wife, who came to the game with me after the game, was like, I feel like they only scored on free throws in the second half. And I thought about it, and she's kind of right. I mean, they couldn't hit anything, even finishing at the rim. Conversely, the Warriors were chucking up threes and everything was falling down. Now, to be fair, that's not going to happen every game. Like, the Warriors have struggled to shoot the ball this season. They just went on a massive heater in this game, and the Bulls were on the receiving end of a hot night from the Warriors. That said, though, I mean, it just goes back to the Bulls' horrendous defense. Like, some shots the Warriors were hitting were just ridiculous, even when they were heavily contested, but they were leaving some of these guys wide open. Players I had never even heard of. Quentin Post? Who the hell is that guy? Man has barely played in the NBA, and he comes in looking like a star, hitting 3 after 3, and the Bulls just kept leaving him wide open. You would think after hitting his first initial shots, yeah, you would maybe make some adjustments to ensure that doesn't happen. Guy Santos? This man hit 5 threes. What? I mean, leave it to the Bulls to underestimate their opponent, where they have the bench, the Warriors bench, score 82 points in this game. Steph Curry didn't even have to do too much for the Warriors to absolutely crush the Bulls in this one. And look, I see something like this where a team's bench absolutely obliterates the Bulls, and I can't help but think this goes back to really being truly prepared for the game. Are the players and coaches really looking at the scouting report? What's the game plan? How are you revising the game plan in real time? This team, a lot of the time, is not prepared going into games, and that's on coaching. The Warriors played last night in Sacramento. The Bulls had 2 days off. No excuse to be as ill-prepared as they were. I know a lot of people have been saying it, but Billy Donovan's job security needs to be studied. It's time to make a change, especially considering the Bulls are going in a new direction with this roster, or at least presumably. We'll see what happens over the next 2 weeks over the trade deadline. Anyway, still, incredible experience, very much worth it. Just wish it would have been a better game. Bulls are heading back home now, and they're going to be taking on the team right behind them in the standings, the struggling 76ers. Let me know what you guys thought of the game. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.